Chapter 14. The Four Faces of Foley. Mrs. Quesada stood beside her son's hospital bed. Any concern she may have felt was not obvious by her demeanor. What was clear was her annoyance at the situation. Joey looked like he had been the victim of an accident, just not a particularly gruesome one. The bandage around his head looked more like a precaution, as there was no visible blood seeping through. If there was blood, and lots of it, his mother may have been more sympathetic. After all, it was now Sunday morning, and she was forced to miss church over the previous night's fiasco. If Joey was going to interrupt her time with God, his injury should at least be severe enough to land him on the doorstep of the afterlife. Sitting in a chair beside his wounded client was the ever-present Scally. Although he didn't outwardly show it, he was a bit more concerned about the injury. Not so much for Joey's overall health, but at the prospect of his Saturday night wrestling streak being put into jeopardy. Mauling a bunch of bingo-playing seniors saved Joey's streak this time. But would Brawl allow him to wrestle in a sanctioned match with his head still wrapped in bandages? Those needed to come off, and quick, unless there was another way. Scally's little mind mulled over the possibilities. Mrs. Quesada rubbed her lips for a moment before finally verbalizing what she had been thinking. When the hell are you going to give up this wrestling crap? This was not quite the way Joey had expected the conversation to start. Given that he was laid up in the hospital, he had hoped that his own mother, at least, would show a little tenderness. His disappointment was obvious as he whined, "Come on, Ma, I just got hit with a chair a little awkwardly." This was not even remotely close to the answer Mrs. Quesada wanted to hear. As if to emphasize this point, she smacked her son upside the head. Still no blood. This only made her angrier. Startled, Joey put his hand on his bandages. More surprised than hurt, he cried, "What was that for?" His mother glared down at him. "'Cause you're over 40 and still getting hit by chairs." She then reached out and swatted the boa around his neck, her blood pressure continuing to rise. "And why do you have to wear those stupid feathers in here?" Pulling away a little, Joey said, "It's my signature look," ready to stick up for his best friend Scally cut in. "You never know when the paparazzi's gonna come around." Clearly pleased with this answer, Joey attempted to fist bump his grinning manager, but his arm couldn't quite complete the trip from his position in bed. They ended up more knuckle-grazing than fist-bumping until they tried again. This time, with a lot more cheese to it, they properly bashed fists, and then beamed, as if they had actually accomplished something of cultural merit. Mrs. Quesada could only shake her head in disgust. Mercifully, the scene of motherly disappointment and displaced revelry was interrupted when an orderly stepped into the room carrying breakfast for the patient. As the orderly rested the tray in front of Joey, a small carton of milk on it seemed to shine like a neon sign. The orderly, paying little attention to this and not caring either way, just turned back and left without saying a word. Joey was clearly upset. Holding up the tiny milk, he bemoaned, "Ma, they gave me 1%. You know this hurts my tummy." Mrs. Quesada's expression somehow softened at this. They had finally reached a topic where she could feel some sympathy for her child. 1% milk messed with her innards as well, and this situation would soon be rectified. Gently patting Joey's head, she said lovingly, "I know, my special boy. Let me see what I can do." Joey smiled as he watched her turn and leave, her motherly instincts finally kicking in. "Thanks, Ma. You're the best!" A nurse popped her head in the room and took a look at Joey's chart. Her striking features immediately caught Scally's attention. Yes, she was Asian. Scally gazed at her longingly. Was this his chance at redemption after his last journey to the Far East with Washi and Sayo crashed into the sea? When the nurse turned and left, Scally had a half grin on his face. "I think my yellow fever's acting up. Time to renew my prescription." Without waiting for or even needing his friend's acknowledgement or encouragement, Scally took off after the Asian goddess in scrubs. He would not be returning soon. Joey simply shook his head at Scally's political incorrectness before noticing that an extremely large male doctor was suddenly standing at the foot of his bed with his back facing him. Thinking that the doctor must have entered behind the nurse, Joey just waited patiently for whatever he had to say. The sound of Scally's fleeting footsteps echoed through the hall when the doctor finally spoke. It was not at all what Joey had expected.
"We're here to toughen you up, Lish."
The doctor spun around, and Joey's eyes widened as he marveled at the WWE legend, Mick Foley. "Mick Foley, what are you doing here?"
"I'll address that momentarily. But first, let me state that it's great to be here, right here, in Brooklyn, New York.
This two-time world champion knew how to properly announce one's arrival. His words were punctuated by a groan of pain from the other unseen patient in the room. Joey looked over at the room's divider curtain as Mick acknowledged the sound with a simple,
"Thank you."
Then the Micker was right back on topic.
But my main purpose for being here, Joey, is not to get a cheap pop from the gentleman behind the curtain. It's to teach you how to become hardcore.
I think I'm pretty hardcore already. Pointing at his bandaged head, Joey felt that this was all the evidence needed to show his commitment to the art of getting one's ass kicked. Mick shook his head and sneered.
You just sent your mother out to get you milk that doesn't give you a tummy ache.
I'm lactose intolerant. Slamming his clipboard to the floor, Mick strode forward.
Then switch to soy or almond milk.
This suggestion baffled the patient. Almond milk? How do you make milk from almonds? Folding his arms across his chest, Professor Mick began to explain in detail.
Actually, it's a very delicate process. As you know, Joey, almonds have no nipples.
Joey nodded in agreement, the whole idea completely beyond his comprehension. Mick continued.
So therefore it's necessary to grind them into a fine paste, and then siphon off all the pulp. Very important.
Is that like a Foley family recipe? Joey was really into this learning thing now. He was about to take notes. Mick gave his student a quick punch to the face to dispel such notions.
That's enough about milk. Now man up, Licious, and listen here. My former employer didn't see the potential in me until I was thrown off of a 27-foot-tall steel structure. But after I was thrown off that 42-foot-tall steel structure, I was world champion all because of a perilous 90-foot plunge.
Feeling his excitement rise, Joey sat up straight. Ignoring the new pain in his jaw, he added, You know what? You're right. Watch this. Grabbing the closest thing at hand, he slammed the 1% milk carton against his head, causing it to explode all over him and Mick. Wiping milk from his face, Mick muttered,
That is not quite what I had in mind.
His voice was firm as he called out,
Nurse, we're going to need some help.
Almost like magic, a male nurse wearing a hippie t-shirt, sunglasses, and a tie-dye bandana appeared at the foot of Joey's bed. His surprise quickly turned to excitement as Joey realized he was looking at Mick Foley's alter ego, Dude Love. Dude Love spoke first.
Ow, Dr. Foley. Is there a need for some naughty nursing?
Joey grabbed his bedsheet and wiped the milk from his eyes. This did not change what he saw. No way! Dude Love? The colorful male nurse smiled as he strutted to Joey's bedside opposite Mick and held up his hand.
Up high, Daddy.
Joey excitedly stretched and high-fived the friendly wrestler. Dude then lowered his hand with the palm facing up.
Down low.
Joey grinned like a fool as he attempted a low five, but Dude pulled his hand away for the miss.
You're too slow.
Mick laughed.
He got ya. Don't worry about it, Joey. He gets all of us.
He was very pleased as he pointed at his alter ego.
Good one, dude.
Joey frowned as if he was suddenly putting things together. Wait a second. His eyes went back and forth between Mick and Dude Love. Aren't you two the same Dude simply shook his head.
Daddy, the dude understands your plight, but understand that kicking heavy-duty booty was never exactly the dude's bag. All the dude was ever interested in was making sweet, sweet love. But then the Micker and his friends taught the dude about a different type of love. Tough love.
This brought further confusion to Joey. Mick's friends? Who are you talking about?
No one knows more about tough love than these kooky cats.
Dude Love pulled back the divider curtain to reveal the other patient in the room. To Joey's surprise, he had been sharing a room with Mick's other alter egos, hardcore legends Cactus Jack and Mankind. Cactus Jack strode forward holding a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire and singing, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Behind him, Mankind picked up a steel chair and followed with a wicked grin, barely visible under his surgical mask. Joey's eyes darted around the room in fear. Guys, not that I'm not super excited to meet you, but can we talk about this for a second? Mick Foley simply laughed at Joey's pathetic plea.
Go get 'em, boys.
Mankind stepped around Cactus Jack and lifted the steel chair high, his ominous words muffled by the mask.
What goes up?
Joey watched helplessly as the chair crashed down on his already injured head. Mankind spoke just as the chair made contact.
Must come down.
This hurt much more than the old-timers blow at the bingo brawl, and Joey would probably spend another night or two in the hospital for it. Dude Love held up a hand.
Lighten up, Manny.
Cactus Jack continued to sing as he wrapped the barbed baseball bat around Joey's neck and began choking him. The poor patient could barely make out Dude Love's words.
Ow! There are barbs on that wire.
But through all the mayhem and pain, Joey could not for the life of him figure out how Mick Foley was doing all this. It was Mick and all three of his alter egos in the same room at the same time. Was it an optical illusion? Were they secretly quadruplets? Or was he, meaning Joey himself, just crazy? Although the third scenario was the obvious route to investigate, Joey still dwelled on the first two. Interrupting Joey's inner deliberations, Mankind flung the chair to the side.
I'll take it from here, Cactus. You already made your point.
A strange expression passed over his face as he considered his own words. Chuckling, he said,
Point. Good one, dude.
Without warning, he grabbed Joey and launched him onto the other hospital bed. Then Mankind reached into his pants and pulled out his own alternate personality, Mr. Sacco, a literal sock puppet, and placed it over his arm. Mr. Sacco, feeling no need to introduce himself to Joey, skipped right to the fond farewell.
Have a nice day.
Joey dreaded what was next, but his dread quickly turned to disgust when Mr. Sacco was shoved into his gaping mouth, which caused him to choke. Ah! Cactus Jack stood on the side and laughed.
Bang, bang.
Dude Love stood on the other side looking approvingly at the events unfolding.
Love can be very painful, Daddy.
Suddenly, the Asian nurse rushed back into the room with you-know-who on her coattails. Once again, Scally's prescription for his Asian persuasions was not renewed. In fact, it was never filled in the first place. He was obviously frustrated by this, but his demeanor quickly changed when he came face to face with the real disaster at hand. The nurse's voice was firm, but she was well beyond concerned as she demanded, "What the hell is going on in here?" Joey was about to explain, but Mick Foley and his alter egos had all managed to escape without another word or trace. He looked down at what should have been Mr. Sacco on Mankind's arm, but saw the foot of an elderly patient shoved inside his mouth instead. The battered old-timer was someone Joey vaguely recognized, but he certainly was not another version of Mick Foley, even if Mick had returned from a time machine some 25 years later. It was the disgruntled bingo player who hit Joey with the chair that sent him to the hospital in the first place. The senior bellowed, "Get this maniac off of me!" He pulled his foot out of Joey's mouth, but the frantic Italian wasn't ready to let someone's fragile grandfather off that easily. It was difficult to accept that Mick Foley and his alter egos had managed to get away, so Joey continued to wrestle with the elderly patient's leg, almost in protest. Clearly worried about his safety, the patient looked accusingly at the nurse. He slammed his milk against his head and started screaming about being hardcore. It was at that moment that a beaming Mrs. Casada returned with her son's lactose-free milk. "Look what Mama got for!" The smile froze on her face as she took in the scene. Joey immediately sought her help with more pressing issues. "Ma, help me, Mick and his friends are beating me up." The elderly patient grabbed a nearby bedpan and struck Joey over the head with it, knocking him unconscious. He hollered, "I'm not even Irish, you racist bastard, stop calling me Mick." It quickly dawned on Scally that this was the same old-timer who had knocked Joey out the first time. Again? Mrs. Casada was like a statue as she stared at the aftermath. Her son, in the midst of some kind of midlife crisis, finally had blood seeping through his bandaged head. His mother would miss the afternoon mass at church as well. Chapter 15. Imaginary Friends. Double parked in front of the hospital with the engine already running, Mrs. Casada sat behind the wheel of her 2007 Honda Civic, with Scally at her side. Joey had just exited the hospital in a wheelchair and was now being pushed toward them by the same orderly who brought him the 1% milk. The orderly hit the brakes just outside the hospital doors. "Okay, time to get off." Joey looked up at him incredulously. "The car's like 15 feet away?" Scally, having no patience to begin with, leaned over the console between the two front seats of the Honda and blasted the horn 3 times. Mrs. Casada gave him a look of displeasure, which he of course didn't notice. As if the horn weren't enough to motivate his friend's expediency, Scally called out, "Come on, Joe! Real Housewives of Atlanta starts in 20 minutes. Joey waited expectantly for the orderly to keep pushing. He could have waited a week. It didn't matter. The orderly was clocking out, "I'm sure you can walk from here." Finally, Joey pushed himself out of the wheelchair in a huff and grumbled, I gotta do something about my insurance. Witnessing the dramatic turn of events, Scally leaned out of the window and beamed, Hop in, Lish! Road to recovery, baby. Joey stopped just outside of the passenger door. It's my mom's car. You sit in the back. This was obvious protocol for children of any size. If someone's parent was driving, their friend would not have access to the car radio. Scally surrendered with a sigh. Too lazy to get out of the car and walk a full step, he haphazardly climbed over the seat and accidentally kicked Mrs. Quesada in the head before settling in the back. He was entirely unaware of what he had just done. What else is new? Mrs. Quesada ignored Scally's clumsiness. A kick to the head was a fair price to pay if the alternative was him sitting next to her. She had her son to deal with, and that was quite enough. All set. Your Highness? Joey sniffed like a little boy who had been pouting before opening the passenger side door and climbing in. He knew that another chewing out was coming, but he prayed for silence at least for a little while. The tension in the car was palpable as Mrs. Quesada pulled away and drove them home. Joey and Scally sat on the living room couch of the Quesada apartment, watching Real Housewives of Atlanta, with a giant bowl of popcorn between them. Scally was hogging the popcorn as usual, but Joey didn't mind. He was enjoying their favorite TV show, and his mother had not broken up the party, yet. This last detail gnawed at him. As much as he was enthralled with the trials and tribulations of Debbie and her husband in Atlanta, Joey knew it was only a matter of time before his mother put her final stamp on the disastrous weekend. She actually missed Sunday Mass, and her streak of going to church every Sunday was even longer than his Saturday night wrestling one. Of course, this was all his fault, and Joey knew he would hear about it before the lights went out. As if reading her son's mind, Mrs. Quesada entered from the kitchen and, without a word, turned off the TV. Scally sat up in protest. Hey! Doing his best to play dumb, Joey added, Come on, Ma, Debbie's husband just canceled her shopping credit card. The expression on Mrs. Quesada's face said it all. She didn't give a damn about Debbie, her husband, or her credit cards. She only had one thing on her mind. We need to talk. It was time to take his medicine, and Joey knew it. He sat back. All right, so talk. Her eyes drifted to Scally. Are you sure you want your friend to hear this? Scally and I have no secrets. The honest truth was Joey thought his mother would hold back the real hellfire if Scally was at his side. Scally might even chime in with something dumb enough to deflect her anger. Yes, this part would absolutely happen. Feeling proud, Scally sat on the edge of the couch. Yeah, Mrs. C, you know that. Mrs. Quesada wiped her hand over her mouth as she sat down. She was clearly looking to find the right words. It's happening again. But there was no anger in her tone. Joey, relieved by her tone at least, just waited patiently for his mother to elaborate. When she didn't say anything, he asked, What is? She gritted her teeth. You know what? You're seeing your imaginary wrestling friends again. Waving a hand, he dismissed her concern. That was nothing. I took a blow to the head. Scally's eyes shifted to Joey. It was a subject he was hoping to let slide, but now that Mrs. Quesada had brought it up, he knew that he needed to say his piece. The expression on Scally's face let Joey know that even his best friend and manager wasn't buying his bull. Joey held his hands up defensively. What? Scally looked away. I think I witnessed a few episodes myself, even before the injury. This was more than true. Even putting the bingo incident with imaginary Ric Flair aside, Scally had recently found Joey rolling around on his bedroom floor with a rowdy Roddy Piper doll that he was convinced was the real McCoy. This was particularly strange because the great Piper had unfortunately passed away some time ago, so was Joey now seeing ghosts as well? Mrs. Quesada's face was unusually expressive, and it radiated concern. Sweetie, when this was happening when you were a kid, it was cute, but you're over 40 now. Maybe you should see someone. Scally hesitated for a moment. Are you seeing anyone now? Joey gave his friend a strange look, as if Scally should already know that he hadn't been talking to a shrink. Realizing he needed to provide clarification, Scally added, No, I mean in this room with us? Joey's eyes drifted to a manic figure suddenly standing behind his mother. It was Mankind waving his arms.
Say no. Say no.
Joey couldn't pull his eyes away from the crazed wrestler, let alone find his voice to respond to Scally's question. Mankind warned him.
Otherwise, they'll put you away like they did to me.
Mrs. Quesada frowned, thinking that her son was resenting her inquiries and glaring at her instead. Don't look at me like that. Scally patted Joey's arm. Hey, I'm getting help for my problem. That was all it took to get Joey to snap out of it. Turning an angry look to his scheming pal, there was a lot Joey wanted to say. He knew very well that Scally wasn't getting help, and whatever he was getting was only making things worse. His mother pulled his attention back to her. Don't look at him like that either. Robert's making an effort. Scally beamed. Yeah. Petulantly, Joey sat back on the couch. Clearly they were ganging up on him. I'm not crazy, okay? Knowing that her son wasn't going to listen to reason, Mrs. Quesada figured she would put her foot down where she felt she could. Well, you're at least listening to your physical doctor and taking a break from wrestling. For a while. Joey was flabbergasted. What about my streak? Mrs. Quesada stood up and glared down at her son. I don't care. You had a concussion. One more hit to the head and who knows? Scally nodded in agreement. Yeah, Lish, you're already seeing stars. Joey shoved Scally off the couch and halfway across the room. His mother put her hands on her hips. Joey! Looking down at his friend with a look of satisfaction, Joey gloated. Who's seeing stars now? Chapter 16. Small helmet, smaller office. After barely convincing his mother that he needed to at least continue his exercise regime while mending, Joey made his way to Marine Park. It didn't bother him one bit that he was over 40 and still needed his mother's permission for such things. Living rent-free had its price. Dressed in sweats, he pulled out a jump rope at the concrete area next to the jogging path and began to stretch with it. Scally ambled over with a baseball batting helmet tucked under his arm. Here, put this on. Scally's managerial skills quickly on display. Joey looked down at the hard plastic object. Why? Why do you think? To protect your head. I'm about to jump rope. You're working out. Anybody can get hurt during a workout. Did Scally really need to state the obvious? As ridiculous as he felt about it, Joey was in no mood to argue. Snatching the helmet, he attempted to put it on his head. Nothing doing. It was way too tight, and it wouldn't even get past his ears. Joey continued to struggle with it anyway. What size is this? I don't know. It fit me at the store. Scally obviously didn't take into account certain mathematical elements. The helmet fit Joey's head in the same way the Haiti Kid's tights would fit Andre the Giant. Your head's the size of a peanut. Joey was actually in pain now. He was about to be in agony. Unwilling to give up before exhausting all options, Scally had a brilliant idea. Hang on, without warning. He jumped up and slammed down on the helmet with both of his open palms. If this sounded like an earthquake inside Joey's head, it felt a whole lot worse. But the helmet did manage to make its way past his ears before crashing down on his skull. Joey pulled away. Ow, watch it. I'm coming off a concussion. I know, that's why I brought the helmet. Well, who could argue with that? Joey pinched his fingers in front of Scally's face. I'm this close to pile driving you through concrete. Waving Joey's hand out of his face, Scally scoffed. Let's go. Focus. Only a few days till your next match. Scally stepped back as his one and only client began to jump rope. This proved to be much harder than usual for Joey, with the extra inches of helmet in the way. The rope kept striking the plastic appendage, throwing off Joey's rhythm. He halted his workout in frustration. I can't jump rope with this thing on. It's too big. Not following that logic, Scally countered. You just said it was too small. Joey's glare was far less effective through the helmet. I mean, high. How can it be high and small at the same time? It's higher than where my head usually is, okay? That settled the clarification. Or did it? Fed up either way, Joey tried to pull the helmet off. Not a chance. Great. Now it's stuck. Scally rolled his eyes. Let me see that. He tugged on the helmet with all his puny might, but Joey quickly pushed him away. Stay away from me. Joey went back to work on the helmet himself, but his efforts proved to be even more futile. Suddenly, he gave up altogether and threw the jump rope at his manager in a panic. Quick, hide this. Baffled, Scally looked around and spotted a female jogger heading in their general direction. Hey, isn't that Anne-Marie? Joey hissed. She can't see the jump rope. Her husband died using that. Seeing his friend's point, Scally mused, of a head injury, and you're wearing a helmet. Exactly, get rid of it. Instead, Scally took the opportunity to yank on the helmet again pushing him away. Joey wailed, The rope! Get rid of the rope! But it was too late. Anne-Marie had pretty much reached them, and she started to slow, realizing who and what her eyes were adjusting to. Giving her a quick wave, Joey spit out with forced pleasantry, Hi, Anne-Marie. Nice day, huh? I see we're both getting in a workout. Trying to rectify the situation, Scally held up the rope. But he's totally not jump roping, I am. He just happens to be wearing a helmet for protection. The idiot shook the rope as if the emphasis would convince her. Joey awkwardly laughed that off as Anne-Marie gave them a confused look. Without a word, she jogged right on past them, even picking up her pace to a near sprint. Joey watched in humiliation as her silhouette quickly disappeared down the jogging path, which was now a running path. As soon as she was out of sight, Joey shoved his little troublemaker, "Scally, you idiot." Lou sat at his cluttered desk in his equally cluttered and cramped office. To say this was not the ideal place for a meeting with a group of wrestlers would have been the understatement of the century. A few skinny dwarves would have trouble squeezing into this rat hole with Lou in his desk, never mind 3 members of Brawl and 1 unqualified manager. Taking in his boys, Lou's eyes stopped on Joey, who was wearing a baseball helmet. Uncertain what to say about that, his gaze continued over to Scally, Una Grenada, and Milkshake. Understandably, they were all jostling for elbow room. With a sigh, Lou decided to get things started. "All right, guys, you probably know why I called this meeting tonight." Joey looked around. "Where's Shamrock? He don't have to show?" Waving away the concern, Lou said, "Don't worry about Shamrock. Una Grenada wasn't willing to just let that pass. Did he graduate to high school venues or what?" There was a bit of bitterness in Lou's voice as he responded, "Our distinguished president, Mr. Morelli, makes that decision." At the mere mention of Brawl's main boss, Joey shook his head in disappointment. If things had gone differently, it could have been him graduating to the next level of wrestling mediocrity. It should have been him. Milkshake had no interest in this kind of talk. "Man, forget Shamrock, Shanty Mick." Offended, Scally leaned in. Hey, Coco beware. Watch with the language." Milkshake simply glared at the wrestling imposter. Then, pointing a finger, he asked Lou, "Why is he even here?" Putting his hands on his knees to keep from getting pushed forward and stepped on. Scally replied, "Earning my 15%. Una Granada snorted. "Lish, you're being cheated." Still airing his grievance, Milkshake added, "No room as it is." Annoyance was clear in his voice as Lou put his foot down. Enough! But the mayhem was just beginning. Tiny had now arrived. Scraping against the side wall, the 300-plus-pound behemoth was already huffing and puffing as he inched his way inside. This was getting ridiculous. Trying to keep his ever-shrinking space, Una Grenada cried, "Whoa, my man!" Joey's helmet struck the back wall as the others tried to reposition themselves. "Tiny!" Milkshake simply muttered, "Damn." Tiny seemed unaware of the damage his mere presence was inflicting. He just figured everyone had a gripe about his tardiness. "Sorry, I'm late." Scally had managed to get pushed to the far side of the room. With his face pinned against the wall, his muffled voice could barely be heard. "We're sorry you showed up." Just outside of the room, the arrival of another unwelcome visitor was heard. "Did somebody order 2 pies?" Ignoring the plight of his wrestlers, Lou called out, "Yeah, in here." A pizza delivery guy appeared at the doorway's threshold. After taking a moment to assess his bizarre surroundings, he joined the party. Undeterred by the lack of space, he miraculously squirmed his way to Lou's desk and made the delivery. Joey saw Tiny immediately reach out for the welcome meal. "Tiny, let Lou pay for them first." But Tiny already managed to secure an entire pie for himself. Nothing would get between him and his food. Not even his own fingers at times, which had scars of their own from previous feasts devoured in haste. Una Granada figured as much. "Yeah, Slim, save us a slice." Before the pizza delivery guy could even begin to make his escape, yet another voice rung out from the doorway. The cramped crowd looked over in absolute astonishment as a female hand held up a stack of papers. "Lou, I have something for you to sign." Lou, as if nothing counterintuitive was going on, just waved her forward. "Okay, Grace, bring it to my desk." Grace gave everyone a cold look, but she wasn't about to argue. She had been Lou's secretary far too long to bother. Instead, she obediently made her way through the can of sardines inch by painful inch. Milkshake got one of her elbows to his ribs. "Are we supposed to crowd surf her to you? How's she getting to the desk?" With his face still pressed against the wall, Scally moaned in agony. "Quit shoving! You're gonna break my neck!" Grace finally made it to the desk, dropped off the papers, then headed back out, ignoring the other occupants. Somehow the pizza delivery guy had also squeezed out amidst the hoopla. When things finally settled and the rest of the pizza was wolfed down, Una Grenada got the supposed meeting back on track. "So you were saying, Lou?" Lou, never one to sugarcoat even the worst of scenarios, broke the news. "Ticket sales for this coming Saturday are looking even bleaker than last week. And those seniors we tangled with are suing the league. We should be suing them. Milkshake spat out in disgust. Una Grenada agreed. Yeah, some witch broke her cane over my back, and I'm still pulling out the splinters. Joey chimed in. And what about my hospital bill? Finally, Scally added his voice to the growing resentment. And what about mine coming after this meeting? Lou hushed them all. Don't worry about the seniors. It's time to focus on this Saturday. I have an idea that should spicing things up. Whenever Lou came up with a new innovative booking plan, the wrestlers held their collective breath. Some laws, undoubtedly, were about to be broken. The IRS already had their own drawer of Lou Rosati files, and it was always open. With that being said, the true members of Brawl welcomed a change whether it was dicey or not. What could possibly be worse than the last few disastrous weeks? After letting the tension in the room build, Lou asked, First off, Lish, are you cleared to fight? I see you're wearing a helmet. I'll be ready, Joey responded stoically. I didn't ask if you'd be ready. I asked. Scally wasn't about to lose his cut, so he shot down any cause for concern immediately. My client will be in the ring. Get on with it. Lou gave Scally a cold look, but decided not to bother pressing him. Fine, I'm going to play up the race card in the Joeylicious milkshake match to get us some press. This was not what everyone had expected. After a pause, Una Grenada asked, Where are we, in Ferguson? Milkshake concurred, Yeah, is he supposed to dress up as a cop and shoot me? Scally saw an opening for his own cheap shot. How about I dress up as a cop? Staring down his little nemesis, Milkshake shot back. I'd choke you out before you even got your piece out of the holster. Lou was pleased how things were already shaping up. Okay, this is all good stuff. Keep spitballing. Tiny talked around a mouthful of pizza. If Lish is still ailing, why don't I just fight Milkshake? I'm white too. Lou thought about that for a second, but ultimately disagreed. The Italian black angle is a bit more primal, but you can fight the Dominican. Una Grenada looked up from a pizza stain on his pants. Puerto Rican. Lou shrugged at the correction. We're fighting at Our Lady of Grace. Does it make a difference? Joey would have wrestled King Kong if it meant keeping his streak alive. Well, I'm down for whatever. What's the plan? Chapter 17. Milkshakes, Payoffs, and Young Guns. Milkshake entered his apartment more bruised from a meeting than from any of his recent matches. It had been a long day, so he was not ready for what waited for him as he stepped into the kitchen. Sitting at the table with her arms folded was his girlfriend, Charlene. There was a delicious but cold-looking meal laid out in front of her, and romantic candles were burnt all the way down to the base. Charlene glared at her man with both anger and sorrow. Milkshake sat down cautiously and gave her an awkward smile. Hey, baby. Sorry I'm late. Charlene gritted her teeth. For our anniversary dinner? Has it been 6 months already? 2 years? I've been cooking all day. It's not like we're married or anything. Milkshake's hole was quickly becoming too big to climb out of. Charlene pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes as this was the one subject they had rehashed extensively. It wasn't her fault that their relationship hadn't progressed. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Okay, listen. Milkshake leaned forward and pulled on one of her hands. Charlene pulled away from him, unwilling to let him touch her. If he was going to smooth talk his way out of this one, she would not lend a hand. Swallowing, Milkshake tried to placate her. I will make this up to you. I promise. Lou called a last-minute meeting. There was nothing I could do. Clearly not smooth enough. Are you really bringing up your wrestling as an excuse? A meeting, no less. Charlene was beside herself. Milkshake pressed forward. You know this is important to me? Honey, you have a real job now. You work for the city. Can you please give up on this professional athlete pipe dream? If the pissed-off approach wasn't working, she would try the practical one. Milkshake frowned and sat back. You see? This is what pisses me off. Charlene leaned forward. You were a basketball player in college. Division III. Okay, so you tore up your knee, but you weren't getting drafted anyway. She kindly left out the fact that Milkshake rode the bench in college and tore up his knee running to a practice he was late for. The NBA has a D-League now. I could have been a walk-on. Milkshake also conveniently left out that fact. Charlene brought them back on topic. You moved your stuff in 8 months ago. When are we going to make this official? Having already lost the argument at Jump Street, Milkshake decided to play dumb. What are we talking about again? Charlene scoffed. Her true anger was about to erupt as she thought of the next line she would scream. Finally, she just threw her linen napkin in her boyfriend's face and stormed off to the bedroom. Milkshake picked the napkin up as he heard the bedroom door lock. Obviously, he would be sleeping on the couch this night, and several nights thereafter. Lou had spent many Wednesday nights at his local dive bar, so he felt right at home conducting shady business here. It was the kind of seedy establishment in which one could get completely drunk for just $20. And from the look of the surrounding clientele, many $20 bills had already been spent. Other than Lou, the only other patron still sitting upright was the greasy little man sitting next to him. This could have been Lou's brother, but he was just a reporter for the Canarsie Courier. The Canarsie Courier was basically a high school paper written by adults who weren't talented enough to write for their high school paper at the time they were in high school. The reporter sitting next to Lou settled for a general education diploma, better known as a GED, but Lou knew how to milk this. If he played his cards right, Brawl could still be saved. The reporter salivated at the sight of the white envelope already sitting on the bar. Well, maybe not the envelope so much, but the cash peeking out from inside. This was all part of Lou's plan. He placed his glass next to the visible cash. "Remember the time I helped you with that little problem?" The reporter looked up from the cash. No, not really. He was honestly confused. Lou had the reporter's attention, and that was all that mattered. Conceding that he hadn't actually done anything to help the man, he said, "Well, I would help you if you ever had one. Just give me the cash." The reporter wasn't interested in Lou's mind games. Lou smiled, looked around as if any of the surrounding drunks were actually watching, and carefully slid the envelope over, the cash shifting ever so slightly during its journey. The reporter quickly grabbed the envelope and shoved it into his pocket before any prying eyes could notice. Once again, there were no prying eyes, just foggy, glazed-over ones. But now the reporter would have to count the pitiful sum he was actually handed in private after the meeting, and that was all Lou had intended with his cloak and dagger act. Feeling confident, Lou continued, "And you're tight with your editor? You can get us a front page?" The reporter's eyes finished darting around the room, paranoia finally running its course. "It's the Canarsie Courier, Lou. I'm not even sure we have an editor." This was true. The Courier's last editor died 3 years ago and still hadn't been replaced. It took 2 years before anyone had realized the editor had actually died. This was not a tight-run ship. Waving his hand, Lou replied, "Just get it done, all right?" Feeling like he had gained equally from their suspect encounter, the reporter held up his glass. "Cheers." The money was good, but with Lou, there was always a possibility that bigger, more lucrative crimes could pay off down the line. Lou looked at him suspiciously. It wasn't like the reporter to make a toast after this kind of transaction, but there wasn't any reason not to join him. Holding up his own glass, they toasted and downed their drinks. The reporter then took off, leaving Lou to his own thoughts. The future of Brawl was starting to look brighter, or darker, depending on one's point of view. Joey stood in front of a volleyball net which was set up for his 7th grade gym class. His students were clearly confused. On one hand, they were looking at a volleyball net. On the other, their teacher was wearing a batting helmet. Yes, believe it or not, Joey still couldn't get that pesky chunk of plastic off. And he tried everything. Butter, cooking oil, powdered donuts. That sucker was stuck and good. The awkward silence hanging in the air was abruptly broken by Scally's unexpected arrival. Wearing street clothes, he strolled up to Joey as if the kids weren't even there. "You actually slept in that thing?" Joey glared at the direct cause of just that. "I can't get it off." It took a second before he realized that there was now a bigger problem at hand. "Why are you here? Father Randazzo reinstated you?" Scally stuck his hands in his pockets. "No, but I need him to. I have these 2 chicks I'm working, and no scratch to take them out." Ignoring his class, Joey asked, "What 2 chicks?" The class was intrigued by this sort of adult talk, and one of the youngsters would not be ignored. "Ha ha, the loser's on unemployment." Scally turned on the wise ass like a whip. "No, the city won't let me collect. I wasn't working here long enough. You believe that, kids?" One of the other more pragmatic students chimed in. "Apparently, our elected officials are even more corrupt than you." Scally frowned. "Well, I don't know about that." Joey waved his knucklehead friend away. "Would you get out of here? You're going to get me in trouble now." "Can't I just hang? I have nothing else to do." Scally wasn't fooling. The bars didn't open till noon. The 7th graders couldn't see their teacher roll his eyes under the helmet, but they did hear him sigh. "Fine. But if Father Randazzo walks in..." "I don't know you." Scally laughed. "He's not going to buy that." "Then just go already." Joey was itching to demonstrate a devastating wrestling move on someone. Guess who? Scally settled the matter. Relax. He's working a funeral. We're in the clear. But there was still that initial confusion between Joey and his students that needed to be settled. And one of the twerps finally steered the class back on track. Why is the volleyball net up if we're playing baseball? Remembering that he actually had a class to teach, Joey quickly defended his syllabus. Who said we're playing baseball? Duh, your batting helmet, one of the kids retorted. The unqualified teacher shook his head. Don't worry about my batting helmet. Picking up a volleyball, he then asked the class, what do you call this? Joey was clearly trying to deflect any and all inquirers into his ridiculous look, but the class clown would not be deterred. This kid's grandfather wore an eye patch and liked to play bingo from time to time. I heard you got your ass kicked by an old man. This got a round of laughter from the entire class. Glaring at them, Joey shouted, quiet! It was a cheap shot from behind, like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Still laughing, one of the students asked, who's Billy the Kid? Scally looked at the ignorant kid incredulously. You never saw Young Guns? The 7th graders must have thought their former instructor was referring to some obscure black and white film. Of course, they hadn't even been born yet when the 1988 Brat Pack Western shined on the big screen. They couldn't pick Emilio Estevez or Lou Diamond Phillips out of a police lineup. Joey figured this was a teaching moment just the same. Actually, Billy the Kid got shot in Young Guns too. Scally shot back, yeah, but he didn't die. Remember he was that old dude telling the story in the end? Joey paused before nodding, oh yeah. Now the students were even more lost. One of them broke through the haze cackling, hey, I'm Billy. I'm a kid. The others cracked up again until Scally snatched the volleyball from Joey and fired it at little Billy. The ball ricocheted off of Billy's head with such force that it literally flew over the net for a point. Any soccer player would have been proud. Game on, bunch of twerps. Scally wasn't playing around. That shut the 7th graders up. Sniffing with bravado, as if he had just won a significant battle, Scally turned back to his one wrestling client. You know, I think that helmet can actually work for you. Joey's forehead wrinkled with intrigue. For the milkshake match? A change of pace never hurt anyone. It was the most profound bit of advice Scally ever uttered. Joey reflected on his recent hospital stay. There was a lot a wrestler could do to mix things up for the better. It had certainly worked wonders for Mick Foley and his 3 alter egos. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Finally, Joey muttered his thoughts. Yeah, like when Mick Foley became mankind. Scally beamed. Ah, you see, now you're thinking. Chapter 18. Gehrig's Ghost. Several brawl participants sat across a long table that was set up for a press conference. Yes, you heard that right. Joey and Scally sat at one end, while Milkshake and Charlene sat on the other. Lou sat between the two parties, looking like a man who was very proud of himself, though he was finding it hard to look at his Italian dream. Joey had added an old-fashioned 1930s New York Yankees uniform to go along with his batting helmet. Gone was his signature black singlet and red boa. In front of them were a few local reporters, all with questions about the upcoming event. Among them, of course, was Lou's main sleaze from the Canarsie Courier. In fairness to the Courier's representative, though, the representatives of the other affiliates were equally third-rate. Behind the reporters were the 4th graders of Our Lady of Grace. After all, this press conference was occurring in their school's cafeteria. It was difficult enough to keep the youngsters' attention at the best of times. They had absolutely no interest in what was happening here. A reporter for the Daily Challenge was the first to jump into the subdued fray. Mr. Rosati, why have this press conference in a grammar school cafeteria? Lou forced a smile. It was a good question, but not where he wanted to start. Saturday night's event will take place in this school's gym, and these kids are our target audience. A reporter from King's Plaza News held up a hand and cut in before being addressed. Who else does your audience normally consist of? That was not a question Lou wanted to hear or answer either, but he couldn't just ignore it. Forcing an even wider smile, he said, priests and nuns, some seniors, but we're open to everyone. Seeing an opportunity to get the young audience involved, he enthusiastically called out to the 4th graders, so kids, tell your parents, tell your brothers and sisters, spread the word. Crickets. Few of the children even knew that they were being spoken to. Realizing this was where he needed to start earning Lou's pittance of a bribe, Canarsie Courier held up his hand and asked quite innocently, Joeylicious, do you have anything against blacks? He asked quite innocently. Looking over at Milkshake, Joey was somewhat confused. No, not... Scally slammed his elbow into his wrestler's ribs. Suddenly, Joey remembered what they had discussed at the incredibly cramped meeting and pivoted. On Saturday night I do. Who said they can wrestle anyway? Can they play basketball? Fine. Football? Sure. Track and field, Scally added, trying to second his client's motion. He ended up undermining it. Joey looked over, his flow interrupted. I'll give them that too. Cricket, the blonde distraction added. Again. I'm talking about this country. Joey was getting frustrated now. Those dark-skinned black guys play cricket in Marine Park every weekend. The manager had a point, but still. Joey sneered. Okay, cricket, whatever. Scally wasn't done yet. Boxing. Milkshake was tired of the nonsensical back and forth and shined the spotlight his way. Damn straight. When was the last time you saw a white guy beat a black man in the ring? Joey slammed his hands on the table. Haven't you ever heard of Rocky Balboa? He beat Apollo to win the title in Rocky II. Yeah, baby, Eye of the Tiger, Scally chimed in. He went to give his best bud a high five, but Joey wasn't having it. No, Scal, that's Rocky III. Scally brushed that off and turned to his African-American nemesis. And that's when he whipped that chump. Mr. T's ass, chocolate milkshake. Milkshake shot up from his chair. Yeah, but don't forget that Mr. T killed Rocky's little white manager right before the fight. Canarsie Courier knew his question planted the seed of controversy, but now he needed another one to make it bloom. Milkshake, is it true that Joeylicious slept with your wife? Charlene, of course, was immediately offended. Excuse me? Milkshake hesitantly looked over at his better half. Actually, we're not married. Naturally, he chose the worst possible response. Engaged? A reporter from the Bay Current asked, hoping for clarification. Milkshake was clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conference was heading. No, we're just dating currently, he reiterated, sprinkling dirt on his grave. Charlene's expression let her man know that he was in serious trouble when they got home, or in the car on the way home. Maybe even during the walk to the car from the table. Either way, Milkshake was royally screwed. But you plan on proposing soon? A member of Kings County pressed. Milkshake, already dead and buried, was fed up with his futile attempts at defusing the bomb, so he just yanked out all the colored wires at once. We're living together, all right? Give a brother some space up in here. Do you think maybe you should finish answering that initial question? Charlene's controlled tone masked her seething anger. What initial... Milkshake suddenly realized where his focus should have been. Oh, right. Nah, Licious ain't banging my wife. Like Scally with Joey, Charlene elbowed her own wrestler in the ribs. I mean, girlfriend, Milkshake shouted, making the quick incorrect correction. Charlene's elbow was far more brutal the second time. Scally figured it was about time he added fuel to the 4-alarm fire and stood up. Yeah, that's because I am. Milkshake's head spun around in a fury. I'll kill him, he screeched. Knocking over his chair, he made a quick dash toward the blonde menace, but the architect of the mayhem grabbed him just in time. Take it easy, Lou whispered in his wrestler's ear. This is working out perfectly. He's just playing the part. Milkshake pushed Lou away and sat back down, his ire and loathing for Joey's best friend barely contained. Another reporter rose a hand. Hi, Don Simmons, Brooklyn Daily Eagle, he began before being recognized. Joeylicious, I see you have a helmet on. Is this part of a new persona? Formerly the Italian Dream, now the Italian Helmet. A couple of reporters chuckled as Joey took the question in stride. In case you haven't noticed, I'm also wearing a Yankees jersey. And what's the significance of that? Brooklyn Daily Eagle pressed. Saturday night, Scally and I will be introducing you all to the alter ego of Joeylicious. How's that for burying the lead? Milkshake's head spun again. What? Aren't we doing the introduction now? Scally asked, trying to correct his client. You're already in costume. I haven't worked out the voice yet, Joey elaborated with his hand over the mic. Scally nodded. So we'll work on that later. Joey mulled that over. Brooklyn Daily Eagle continued with his probing. Intrigue was now in the air. Joey, you were saying? Ready to address all witnesses, Joey's smile widened. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you. He stood up dramatically with his arms outstretched. Gehrig's ghost. He turned proudly to let everyone see the number 4 on the back of his jersey. Come on, man, Milkshake muttered. It was bad enough he had to deal with Charlene later, but now this. Bay Current was interested in learning more. Why Lou Gehrig? This was worth a full paragraph on page 9 of the failing paper at least. Okay, maybe page 11. Scally gave the reporter an obvious look, because of his streak. But Bay Current wanted clarification, so he doesn't have ALS or anything? That went right over Joey's head. He was only thinking of the press getting this part right. I haven't missed a match in 20 years. Yeah, but about the ALS, Bay Current continued, pressing for that page 9 or 11 story. Milkshake was still stewing. He drops a bomb like this. Charlene, seeing how upset this was making her man, softened as she took his hand. It's okay, baby. Daily Challenge caught the heartfelt exchange and chuckled. He shook up the milkshake. Brooklyn Daily Eagle, refusing to be distracted by the couple's apparent reconciliation, pointed his tape recorder at the wrestler formerly known as Joeylicious. Garrick's ghost, other than your outfit, what's the difference between you and Joeylicious? This caught Joey off guard. It was not a question he and Scally had anticipated. Well, Joeylicious is vicious and delicious, Garrick's ghost is. He stammered in search of difference. Vicious, delicious, and Scally saw that his client was flailing and jumped in for the save, safety conscious. Realizing that things were getting away from him, Lou hoped to bring the focus of the press back to where he wanted it to be. Can we get back to the racial questions, please? This lunch period ends in 5 minutes. Scally leaned over to Joey, tingling with anticipation. Things are going to be rockin' on Saturday. Joey smiled. Chapter 19. Race War. Despite what Joey and Scally had been expecting, things were not rocking at Our Lady of Grace's gymnasium that Saturday night. It was pretty much the same scarce lowlife crowd as usual. Lowlife was fine, scarce, not so much. But this was not the time for brawl tears. The show went on. In the ring, doing their best to ignore the low turnout, Joey's new persona, Garrick's ghost, and his opponent Milkshake were mid-battle. Joey had gone all in with his new alter ego. Besides the undersized batting helmet and old-fashioned Yankees uniform, he had even included steel spikes for the match. Scally's cheers echoed throughout the near-empty chamber as he held up 2 large styrofoam cups of beer from the back row of the bleachers. Charlene sat a few rows ahead of him, embarrassed at the fact that she was even there, but her boyfriend wasn't completely useless, so she bared it. At least Milkshake had a real job during the week. Whoever dated this Garrick's ghost character would really have relationship issues. Lou paced the floor nervously, his eyes continuously darting to the gym's entrance. Where the hell was everybody? So far, it looked like Canarsie Courier had really screwed the pooch. The $20 Lou had stuffed into that white envelope might have covered the reporter's Wednesday night drinking tab, but it wasn't doing much here. Milkshake was starting to get distracted as well. Lish, there's no one here, he said, sharing his concern with his opponent. How long should we keep this going? His eyes kept going to Charlene, her arms folded in boredom. Garrick's ghost straightened in confusion. Who's Lish? Milkshake refrained from scoffing at Brawl's newest member. I mean, Garrick's ghost. This is embarrassing, man. Garrick's ghost had also lost hope, but he wasn't about to lose the match. Should I just pin you now? Milkshake tensed up. Pin me? Don't you mean pin you? Garrick's ghost frowned. You beat me last time. And you beat me the 3 times before that. Milkshake shot back. What is this? The best 4 out of 7? I just had an injury. This is my comeback match. Things were getting complicated. Garrick's ghost never even fought before, Milkshake reasoned. Exactly. You expect him to lose in his debut? It was here that Garrick's ghost had finally stuck his landing. A wrestler never lost his first match, unless that wrestler was preordained to lose every match thereafter. Did anyone want Garrick's ghost to be the next Brooklyn Brawler? That guy hardly even landed a punch in the glory days of the WWF. Milkshake was done arguing. He just wanted to go home and curl up with his girlfriend while she was still his girlfriend. Whatever, man, he conceded. Then he let Garrick's ghost execute a devastating move that should have ended his misery. But when the spirit of the great Yankee jumped on him for the pin, a commotion erupted outside the ring. Milkshake took advantage of the welcome distraction and kicked out before the ref could count to 3. Storming through the gym's entrance was a stream of black activists led by Ulysses S. Compton, the biggest rabble-rouser of them all. He was basically the Al Sharpton of Brooklyn before Big Al lost the weight for TV. Ulysses and his gang shouted their displeasures as they carried signs protesting Garrick's ghost, and the legitimacy of the match in general. Lou finally stopped pacing and smiled. Things were back on schedule. The new arrivals even piqued Charlene's interest. "Oh, it's on now." She jumped up from her seat. "Come on, baby, kick some old baseball player ass." Milkshake brought his attention back to Garrick's ghost and shrugged. "Sorry, Gigi. My peeps are here. It can't be helped." It was obvious Garrick's ghost hadn't quite grasped what was happening. "What? Wait!" Too late. Milkshake was already pounding on him. Joey's alternate persona was near tears as he looked out at his one loyal fan who also happened to be his manager in the audience. "Where are my peeps?" As if he had been summoned, Mick Foley suddenly appeared in the corner of the ring.
"We're back."
Garrick's ghost's heart fluttered. Not only was the Micker at his side, but Dude Love, Cactus Jack, and Mankind also appeared in the other corners of the ring. This was the best fan base he could ever ask for. But Mick and his boys weren't there to blindly support their understudy.
"Joey, it's time to answer for some copyright laws you've infringed upon."
Garrick's ghost frowned from under Milkshake's chokehold. "What do you mean?" Mick leaned forward.
"I'm the only wrestler who has allowed multiple personas."
Milkshake, confused by who or what Garrick's ghost was talking to, released the strange wrestler and stepped back. Seeing their opening, all four of Mick's personas then charged forward and wailed on Joey's alter ego. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Casada entered the gym behind Ulysses' last activist and immediately looked with concern toward the ring. She saw what everyone else in the audience saw. Joey Garrick's ghost swinging his arms around like a madman at nothing but air. He even dropped to the canvas a few times as if he had been hit. Milkshake, now even more concerned than Mrs. Casada, took another step back and practically hid behind the ropes for cover. Ulysses could only shake his head. "This white boy's crazy." Mrs. Casada heard that remark, but her eyes were focused on her son. Unfortunately, she agreed with the disruptor's assessment, and now she was going to have to climb into the ring and save Joey from himself. But before Mrs. Casada could take a step in that direction, another crowd burst through the front entrance. This time, it was a bunch of Italian mafioso types led by Capo Johnny Carbone, basically John Gotti in a cheaper suit. The mobbed-up mob carried pro-Joeylicious Garrick's ghost signs as they shouted out their support for a fellow Italian. Lou smiled again, an even bigger one this time. He loved it when a plan came together. Carbone took notice of the nutty baseball player his crew was there to root for. What the hell is he doing? Garrick's ghost had just taken another blow from imaginary Mankind when he caught sight of the latest arrivals. "My peeps," he beamed. Mick and his alter egos suddenly vanished just as quickly as they had appeared. Reinvigorated, it was about time Garrick's ghost had another swing at Milkshake. Carbone saw the fire in Garrick's ghost's eyes. "All right," he cheered. Ulysses was clearly confused. What just happened? The wrestlers were back on an even canvas. Just going through the motions half-heartedly before, they now went all out as if a championship belt was at stake. Of course it wasn't, because Lou was too cheap to buy one in the first place. But the two combatants fought like mad dogs just the same, Milkshake eventually gaining the upper hand. After receiving a brutal blow from his lanky rival, Garrick's ghost flew out of the ring, smashing his head on the hardwood floor. The sound of the helmet cracking helped him regain his senses. Joey jumped up and felt the gym's stale breeze flow through his greasy hair. He looked down in relieved amazement and saw the shattered helmet lying at his feet. With a roar, the non-mobbed-up Italian ripped off the old Yankee uniform to reveal a black singlet and red cape underneath. Joeylicious was reborn. "Yeah," Scally cried out, throwing up a celebratory hand. Of course, beer sloshed out of his styrofoam cup, spilling onto poor Charlene. Carbone went back to being perplexed. "Who's this guy now?" His lieutenant raised a curious eyebrow as well. "Boss, are those highlights in his hair? I thought he was Italian." Carbone could only shrug. "Milkshake, get that white boy," Ulysses shouted, standing closer to the action, as if following orders. Milkshake climbed to the top rope and dove out of the ring, crashing down on his opponent. But Joeylicious recovered quickly. He could see much better without that annoying helmet in his eyes, and Milkshake paid the price. Furious blows in rapid-fire fashion were equally exchanged between the fighters until the ref had something to say. "Double count out." "It's a draw," Scally shouted, taking umbrage with the human zebra. Or draw. "Whichever," the ref said, dismissing the drunk fan. Both camps of supporters responded with boos and cheers alike. Joeylicious and Milkshake struggled to their feet only to look at each other and smile. Hand in hand, They simultaneously threw up their arms in victorious solidarity. It was easily the best fight they had ever had. Carbone approached Joeylicious. I guess we'll both get him next time. Huh, Joeylicious? Yeah, John, good to see you, Joeylicious replied. Let's do lunch sometime. Call my office. You got it. And the two neighborhood rivals headed to the exit as friends. Scally was still jumping up and down on the bleachers, yelling at anyone who would listen until he saw a not-so-friendly face staring up at him. Mrs. Quesada was absolutely fuming at the drunken sight. The blonde menace held up both styrofoam cups. What? They're ginger ales, he said defensively. Find yourself another place to sleep, Mrs. Quesada shot back. Forever. At that, she turned and marched toward the ring. Mrs. C, come on, Scally desperately called out. It's cold outside for May. Joey heard his friend's pleas and turned from his bonding moment with Milkshake to his mother suddenly standing directly in front of him. She was none too pleased. Ma, you came, he cried, shaking off the initial shock of her presence. She immediately smacked her son upside the head. Without waiting for a complaint, she then grabbed Joey's ear and dragged him out of the gym like a child. Lou watched the short-lived domestic dispute with amusement. Shaking his head and laughing, he was suddenly looking forward to his Saturday nights again. Brawl, he muttered to himself with pride. Something off to the side caught his attention, and Lou turned to see his reporter from the Canarsie Courier sitting in the bleachers. The reporter held up the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. There, in large black and white print, was what Lou had been hoping for. Brawl wrestles with racial tensions.